Geezy Truth news. Yeah, duh. Testing 1 2 1 2. Testing 1 2 1 2. Are we live over here? Or what? Whoo. T minus 5 5 5. Geezy Truth news. Everybody's got it. Stay to the truth. Alright, are we ready? All right, everybody. Gonna start to a great new year. Happy new decade, everybody. Testing. Are we getting everything? We got Tom and Jerry over there clicking on the dials. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year, and a whole lot more. We got live out of the studio, Miami, Florida. That's right. Thank you very much. Welcome to Geezy Truth News. It is January 8th, 2020. Incredible. Wouldn't expect to be here. But here we are. So we got a lot of things to talk about, as always. We got to check up on Q. We should have a VIP. Callers calling. Dials are dialing. We'll see what's up. I hope everything's working out here. Whew. What can I say? It's crazy out here. Thank you very much. Let's take a look. How's Q? How's everybody? Iran. Forest fires. Lots of forest fires. Australia, Iran. We killed Soleimani, or apparently we bombed him. The last Q post was December 29, 2019. And it looks like, what can I say? What's going on over here? Apparently the good guys are winning, according to all the statistics and facts and the rest of them. We'll see what's going on. This Iran kerfuffle, most of it, the markets are somehow doing pretty good, as always. Let's see what's up with market cap or market watch. Incredible. It's like no big deal. It went up 30 points. So far, so good. And it's at 28,614. The Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's crazy. And then you go ahead and look at CoinMarketCap. And apparently it's doing pretty decently. It's at 8,359.29 to be exact. So that looks like it leveled up a little bit here. Went up a bit. Went about a G. So there's that. Physicals are doing pretty good. I checked with Kitco. I don't know how everybody's doing. 1,500. And silver, so gold is at 1572 and 60. Silver is at 1832. $18.32, and you never know. A lot of speculation. A lot of it's what's it called? Suppressed scarcity, suppressed markets. They're doing all this fake. You know how it goes. So that's the deal here. Is that we're still here in 2020, January 8th. We're still making a mockery. We're still making, just kerfuffling it up. We're just fluffing it up, economics. But everything's going down. The markets are way oversaturated, just way inflated, and it's ridiculous. I mean, it's all charade. It's all a fake. But here we are. So, what's going on? What's up with the pedogate thing? I'm trying to keep in touch with everybody, trying to see what's up. Apparently, there's also a new thing. Somehow there's a new thing with Epstein. Wasn't there photos of Jeffrey Epstein's cell and a noose made out of a bedsheet published by 60 Minutes? Okay. So yeah, it was yesterday, 5 hours ago. And hopefully this is live. Every time, I always try to remind everybody of this. It's like I try to keep everything public. What I don't like is when it's no comments, when they ban the comments, when they ban the live chat. I try to legalize it. I try to let everything be public, but they always private it or like suppress it or what's new. They always try to do that. So T-Manus at 2, and we're going to hit Jim Fetzer over here. Hopefully he'll pick up. We'll see what's going on. But yeah, I mean, this is just quite absurd, the Jeffrey Epstein thing, but I'm glad that it's still being talked about. I mean, huge things are happening behind the scenes. That we know for a fact. There's new articles 5 hours ago. I'm trying to post it. And hopefully this is working. Otherwise it'd be like, woo. Jeffrey Epstein survivors on coming to terms with what happened to them in Palm Beach. I had blamed myself for all these years. Well, that's what happens. So I told her, quote, "Yeah, I would love to make some extra money for Christmas," end quote, Licata said. So we're trying to get the guys to upload here. And also, tomorrow should be Donnie Boy's, he should have a, public announcement. Public speech tomorrow. So we'll see what that is. So we got the clickers, we got our guys dialing in. So how's everybody doing? All right, here we go. Game time. Looks like we got a little update here. Technical difficulties as always. But that's alright. There's always something, but you just gotta go with the flow. You gotta make sure it works. We're all chilling. But yeah, everybody, we're at the new decade. And a lot of people there's so many prophecies. There's a lot of things going on. This new decade, this year, actually within the next 6 months, I'm gonna guess March is when we're going to, I could be wrong, we'll see what happens, but because according to all these economists, and I know most of them are wrong, but most of them are saying, and hopefully I can review this with Jim too, is that most of these guys are just saying that it's all there's going to be a crash within this next 6 months, when the inverted yields went, it just went an inverted yield last I don't remember what month it was, but it was like last spring or last summer or something like that. It was in 2019. And that's when you know that there's going to be, that's how they always tell when there's an inverted yield in the market on the bonds, whatever, you know what I mean. You go look into it, and when there's an inverted yield, that's when it crashes within the next 6 months or something like that, and that's what happened. So this is where we're going. So these guys are saying that within the next 3 months or next 6 months, that in March, where coming up here, like it's imminent. But we'll see, because people from Peter Schiff all the way to the next guy say that this has been happening, and we thought about that, we've been waiting on it. So. So here we go. Is this going to be working? Right here.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you great. What about me?
Yeah, let me fix this and we can do a video. I'll do a split screen.
Perfect. Jim Fetzer, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just delighted to be here. Thanks for featuring me.
Yes, of course. Anytime. And Happy New Year and Happy New Decade and the rest.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll see what happens. There's
That's right.
Something covering my image there. Can you see me okay?
It doesn't look like you're coming up. It's just your profile pic, but that's all right. I mean, whatever works.
Very strange. Let me. Okay, well let's go with it.
Okay, sounds great. Well, 2020, the first month of the new decade, and there's already been very interesting, a bunch of stuff going on, and so go ahead and tackle them all if you want. More than happy to hear.
Yeah. Well, we have to start with this incredible assassination of the second most powerful political figure in Iran, who was actually a military genius, Qasem Soleimani. It was he who had developed the use of asymmetrical tactics to deal with ISIS in the Middle East. He, more than any other single figure, was responsible for the defeat of ISIS. What has happened here is really quite stunning in multiple respects. Here's the official statement from the Department of Defense. At the direction of the president, and by the way, it's highly unusual for a president to be taking personal responsibility, and I believe there's an explanation for why it's happening in this case. The U.S. military has taken decisive defensive action, except the action wasn't defensive, to protect U.S. personnel abroad by killing Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization. Now, it had been designated a terrorist organization, but in my opinion, highly inappropriately. The Quds Force, if we're looking for an analog in the U.S. military, would be something like a combination of the Marine Corps and Special Ops. In other words, this is a very elite group, very highly trained. They perform the most difficult tasks. The fact is that Soleimani had aided the Lebanese Hezbollah in the War of July of 2006, which lasted just 33 days, in which Hezbollah defeated the Israeli military, widely regarded as having the fourth most powerful army in the world. The Israelis have a special dislike for Soleimani. They were rejoicing, dancing in the street. My opinion is this was in fact an Israeli op, and as I'm going to explain, it seems to me Jefferson Morley had it right when he said that Israel targeted Soleimani, Trump pulled the trigger. So I'm going to elaborate on that theme as we proceed. Meanwhile, General Soleimani was actively developing plans to attack American diplomats and service members in Iraq and throughout the region. This is very much in doubt. The Congress is asking for the proof, for the evidence. It's not at all obvious it's going to be produced. General Soleimani and his Quds Force were responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American and coalition service members and the wounding of thousands more. Well, this is very peculiar. There's some speculation this is going all the way back to the war between Iraq and Iran, where Soleimani was playing a role in defending Iran from the onslaught of Iraq. What the public needs to understand, but is being grossly misled, is that Iran is a peaceful nation. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another state since 1775. 1775. Now, to put that into historical perspective, the ratification of the Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, only began in 1787, 12 years later. George Washington was elected our first president in 1789, 14 years later. For all that period, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against any other state, whereas the United States, by contrast, has launched hundreds. I mean, we have military interventions everywhere. We had dozens and dozens going on just under Barack Obama alone, armed interventions. The Congress, of course, has been lackluster and abdicated its responsibility with regard to American military engagements, leaving that largely in the hands of the executive, even though the Constitution clearly spells out that only Congress has the authority to declare war. So this has been going on for a very long time. But the Vietnamese War was authorized in response to the Gulf of Tonkin, but it's very clear that was a sleight of hand, where Lyndon Johnson himself admitted he had no idea. For all he knew, they were shooting at whales out there. The Turner, Joy, and the Maddox appear to have been used as pawns in order to get a justification, a blank check from Congress, and we know how well that war played out. In relation to 9/11, of course, which was also, by the way, an Israeli operation brought to its compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, overwhelming majority of whom were dual U.S.-Israeli citizens, and the Mossad, in order to justify the U.S. entering the Middle East to take out the modern Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region and eventually to confront the Persian nation of Iran. That plan, the scheme for 9/11, appears to have originated in the fertile imagination of Bibi Netanyahu, who is, of course, still with us, where he had a conference in Jerusalem and published a book in 1987, Terrorism, How the West Can Win, where the concept of terrorism wasn't even in the consciousness of the American people. When, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, a think tank was created, a neocon think tank of mostly dual U.S.-Israeli citizens entitled Project for a New American Century, advocating the United States enter the Middle East and exert military and diplomatic pressure outward from that geopolitically sensitive region on the specious grounds that if this would be the scenario for creating a new American empire which would endure for the next 100 years, hence the title, Project for the New American Century, but it was all smoke and mirrors, camouflage, to draw the United States into the Middle East to take out the enemies of Israel, where the Israelis are willing to fight to the last drop of American blood. It's that bad, and it continues to this day. The Israelis would like nothing better than a war between the United States and Iran, because Iran is the principal competitor with Israel for influence in the Middle East. The Israelis want to have it all to themselves. Continuing with the official Department of Defense statement about Soleimani, he had orchestrated attacks on coalition bases in Iraq over the last several months, including the attack on December 27th, culminating in the death and wounding of additional American and Iraqi personnel. General Soleimani also approved the attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad that took place this week. While you didn't need Soleimani to encourage Iraqis to attack the Baghdad bases, the Iraqis are sick and tired of the U.S. intervention there. It's quite dumbfounding that we were given, of course, the propaganda claim, story, scenario that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, which were never discovered, that we were bringing freedom and democracy to Iraq. To some extent, that has been achieved, and yet when the Iraqi parliament votes for the United States to leave Iraq, Donald Trump threatens them with all kinds of punishment, including asking them to pay for a military base and our massive embassy there, which costs $750 million, close to $1 billion, clear indication that we have no intention of ever leaving Iraq. But if there were freedom and democracy in Iraq, if the United States were respectful, and notice how Donald Trump has been talking about the need for Iraq to be respectful of the United States, but the United States is showing no respect for Iraq with these completely absurd demands, we would get out of Dodge. We would pull our forces out of Iraq, which would mean we'd also have to pull them out of Syria, because the only way they can continue to operate in Syria is with the logistic support provided from Iraq. Now, if Donald Trump wants to be the president he was elected to be, on the campaign promises of getting us out of the Middle East, these meaningless wars in the Middle East, that now he has the opportunity to do it. So we're going to find out now whether this guy was the guy we thought we had elected back in 2016, or some imposter who's been playing a game, for which, alas, I'm sorry to say, there's a mass of evidence that's accumulated, which I shall review, because while I have given this guy every benefit of the doubt, I voted for him, even though in the past I had supported Bill Clinton, voted for him twice, Barack Obama voted for him twice, largely because their opponents seemed to me to be highly unqualified. Well, in the case of Trump versus Hillary, she is a monster. She's the Clinton Foundation, the corruption, the child sex trafficking, the pedophilia with which Hillary is involved is mind-boggling if you dig into it. I have, and they say, knowledge won't necessarily make you happy, and I guarantee you, the more you know about Hillary Clinton, the more distraught you become that a monster of this caliber should ever have ascended to high position in the United States, where, believe it or not, she still has aspirations on running for president yet again, which would be an absolute calamity for the Democrats. But Trump, alas, I'm sorry to say, by this action and others he's taken of late, is running the risk of not only giving the Democrats a bona fide ground for impeachment, but possibly compromising his prospects for 2020. Yeah, go ahead. You wanted to add.
Oh no, I completely agree. I mean, there's no surprise anymore, and there's a lot of people who still trust in Trump, and I'm just, I don't know how much you know about the QAnon thing, and there's just so much.
Well, I've seen this.
Everything is behind the scenes.
QAnon post, you mean about all this being fake in the Middle East? I find that very, very difficult to believe. I do not think the Iranians would participate in any political theater. Obviously, Soleimani was a great hero in Iran and had been instrumental in the defense of Iran for 2.5 decades.
Right.
He was a master at asymmetrical warfare. As McMaster, the one-time National Security Advisor, has observed, there are two ways to fight the United States, asymmetrically or stupid. Well, Soleimani was a genius at asymmetrical warfare, using proxies, improvised explosive devices, and the whole lot. Trump has been castigating him for that, but it's ludicrous. I mean, we have invaded these nations under false pretext of 9/11. None of them had anything to do with the atrocities of September 11, 2001. Not even Osama bin Laden, who in fact was an official with the CIA. Osama was our man in Afghanistan. He was instrumental in getting the Stinger missiles into the hands of the Mujahideen they used to shoot down the Soviet helicopters and planes to drive them out of Afghanistan. He was visited in a hospital in Dubai by an official of the CIA because he was himself an officer, Colonel Tim Osman, working for the CIA. He died on 15 December 2001 of natural causes. His medical maladies, it's tough to get dialysis machines in and out of those caves in Afghanistan. He was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim tradition. There were local obituaries. Both CNN and Fox News reported his death already on 26 December 2001. Now, this was years before the invasion of Iraq, of course, though the invasion of Afghanistan took place almost immediately in the aftermath of 9/11. Barack Obama, however, found it politically expedient to resurrect Osama and have him die for a second time in a compound in Pakistan, all of which was completely fabricated and fake. Local residents had never seen Osama in the vicinity and acknowledged that the person seen in a photograph holding a television remote control was the owner of the compound, most certainly not Osama bin Laden. There was a stage photograph taken in the Situation Room where you had Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama all intensely staring at a large screen TV, which was published, claiming they were watching the raid in Pakistan and go down in real time, until Leon Panetta, who was then the director of the CIA, blew their cover by explaining that there had been no live coverage of the event for the first 20 or 25 minutes, which would have approximated the entire duration of the event. So that by taking out or posing as having taken out Osama bin Laden, allegedly the most wanted terrorist in the world, Barack Obama positioned himself for a triumphal re-election. He claimed the tip had come from Guantanamo. He'd wanted to close Guantanamo, had been criticized for it not happening. It was actually Republicans who wouldn't let it do it. But now everyone said, well, gee, I guess it's good we still have Guantanamo open. He claimed to have used troops in Pakistan, for which he'd also been criticized. So you got a similar response on that count. Well, gee, I guess they were there after all. And all the issues about his fabricated death certificate were wiped off of the front pages, and he was positioned for a triumphal re-election. Now, I believe that Bibi approached Trump and suggested that if Trump were to take out Soleimani, and I'm rather confident Trump himself had never even heard of Soleimani, that he could perform the same political feat as Obama by claiming to have taken out the most wanted terrorist in the world and posed himself for a triumphal re-election. Ironically, I believe it's going to have precisely the opposite effect. Here's a tweet, by the way, that came out right away, with which I agree wholeheartedly, from Ian56. If it is true the U.S. has stupidly assassinated Iran's top military commander, Soleimani, Trump just put literally thousands of American lives in danger, severely damaged his chances of re-election, and quite possibly started World War III. This is the most stupid thing Trump could possibly do. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Just to illustrate a couple of points, Nancy Pelosi, Trump attacked Iranian commander without authorization. Joe Biden, President Trump just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox, and he owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan. I agree with all of that. There are a number of really excellent blogs that I've republished on my own at jamesfetzer.org, including one by Kevin Barrett from about a year ago, which I've just republished, actually originally on 5 October 2019, General Soleimani, world's most accomplished military figure in counterterrorism, which begins as follows. An American political analyst and author describes Iran's IRGC Quds Force Commander Major General Qasem Soleimani as the world's most accomplished military figure in the field of counterterrorism. Major General Qasem Soleimani is the world's most accomplished military figure in the field of counterterrorism, now quoting Kevin Barrett. General Soleimani's fight against Daesh, which we know as ISIS or Islamic State, is a wholehearted fight, unlike America's ambivalent war on Daesh that has included covert support for the same terrorists it fights. The reality behind the scene is that we created ISIS. It was introduced in 2012 by Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State John Brennan, then the head of the CIA, and Barack Obama, to put pressure on Bashar al-Assad, who is, by the way, the democratically elected president of Syria. Many Americans to this day do not understand. Tulsi Gabbard showed the integrity and the courage, really showed the balls no other Democratic candidate has, to visit with Bashar al-Assad. He's actually a physician and ophthalmologist.
Wow.
who has the support of 80% of the Iraqi people, and she was demonized for meeting with a dictator. Well, he isn't a dictator. But let me tell you what complicates, moreover, and I think makes even more despicable what Trump has done in this instance. We have a report directly from the Prime Minister of Iraq. Trump asked me to mediate with Iran, then assassinated my guest, that Soleimani was in Baghdad for Saudi talks that Iraqis were mediating a day after asking the Iraqi PM, Trump asking the Iraqi PM to do the same between the U.S. and Iraq. Well, we have a further report from veterans today. Breaking confirmed Soleimani killed on diplomatic mission to Iraq to receive Trump-Pompeo missive. I mean, this is so disgraceful. And of course it gets worse when you find Trump threatening to take out 52 sites, including cultural and religious sites in Iran, which is an ancient civilization dating back approximately 4,000 years, all of which would be a catastrophe, gross violation of war crimes in international law, in a form of collective punishment, where all the residents of a group or punished for actions by their leader that's proscribed by the Geneva Conventions and international law. So Trump is thereby announcing he himself would like to be the world's greatest war criminal by taking out these 52 sites, allegedly justified the number by there having been 52 hostages at the Iranian embassy when the Islamic revolution took place, and the people of Iran regained control of their country, conveniently omitting, whether by ignorance or deception, that the reason the hostages were being taken, the embassy was being stormed, was that the United States had executed a coup in Iran in 1953 that was supervised by Kermit Roosevelt, who was a cousin of Teddy Roosevelt, and where the fact is we took out their prime minister at the time and installed the Shah, who turned out to be tyrannical and had one of the most vicious secret police the world has ever known, torturing, killing his political enemies right and left. The Iranian people had ample cause for regarding the United States as the great Satan, stemming from the coup in Iran in 1953. But the American people, by and large, are completely oblivious. Here was a nice note coming from Moonrock Book, actually from Money Tree Publishing, which is a brilliant book about entitled The Host and the Parasite by Greg Felton, who exposes the historic relationship between Israel and the United States. Mm-hmm. It reads, why would Trump order the assassination of the man most responsible for the defeat of ISIS? Because Israel wanted him to. Major General Qasem Soleimani, 62, reportedly the second most powerful person in Iran, was described as the linchpin in bringing together Kurdish and Shia forces to defeat the U.S.-Israeli creation and oversaw joint operations conducted by the two groups. We created ISIS. Saudi Arabia and Israel financed. Saudi Arabia was providing on-the-ground medical assistance to injured ISIS members. I mean, it was a real terrorist organization performing all kinds of atrocities, looting, raping, beheading, a truly monstrous organization, the creation of the United States with the support of Saudi Arabia and Israel. Turns out, by the way, this is fascinating too, that Israel had advance notice of the U.S. plan to kill the Iranian general. I don't think it's just that Israel had advance notice, that it was really a plot that originated with Israel, which Bibi is seeking to conceal by suggesting that Israel had nothing to do with it. And this, I dare say, gets back to why Trump has been taking such public responsibility. I think it was part of their agreement and consultation that Bibi insisted that the role of Israel in this event, where I published a quite brilliant piece by Jefferson Morley. After Mossad targeted Soleimani, Trump pulled the trigger, where Bibi is insisting that ministers stay out of purely American event. Well, you've never heard anything like that before. Not only have you never had an American president take personal responsibility for an attack of this kind, an assassination, and notice how it was a double whammy, because they were not only assassinating the leading military figure, the primary advisor to the Ayatollah Khomeini from Iran, but it was done in Iraq, which is a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. So to try to keep that distance so there won't be a retaliation against Israel, which, by the way, I personally believe is in the works. I think that this attack on the airbase was merely a feint to create the impression that Iran had responded when they have much, much more serious plans in mind. But where Bibi is also promising a strong response if Israel is attacked. Well, why should he be worried about Israel being attacked if Israel had nothing to do with it? So, I think we're getting the big picture here. The problem for Trump, as I see it, being that he's now given the Democrats a real reason to impeach him. I've been very severe about the contrived bases for these attacks based on his conversation with President Zelensky of Ukraine, which had no substance, carried no weight, completely artificial, were legitimately dismissible on their face, versus what could be a new article of impeachment based upon his violation of international law and the Geneva Accords by taking out Soleimani, and I'd couple it with his threat to take out the 52 sites in Iran, which was just monstrous. Now, to explain what has led me to no longer believe in Donald Trump, when I first read a book about his campaign, it may have been called Fire and Fury. I was just stunned by the extent to which virtually all of his advisors were Zionists, pro-Israel, even neocons, very anti-Iran, very pro-Israel, notwithstanding the fact that Israel has been sucking the blood and treasury out of the United States for virtually the whole of its existence. And when Trump came into office, of course, he gave these speeches to AIPAC, which is a foreign agent. AIPAC is the most powerful lobby in Washington, D.C., representing the Israeli government. John F. Kennedy was the last president to require the Israeli lobby to register as a foreign agent. That was a precursor of AIPAC called the World Jewish Congress. But no president since has had the courage or integrity to do so. Where Cynthia McKinney revealed over a decade ago now that when new members of Congress arrive in Washington, they're asked to take a pledge to put the interests of Israel ahead of those of the United States, and where those who refuse to sign the pledge find themselves confronted with a well-financed alternative candidate next time around, or that if a census has occurred, their districts have been redrawn and they no longer have a seat, where Cynthia herself was able to overcome those obstacles and serve 6 or 8 terms in the Congress, but where even as notable a figure as Dennis Kucinich, whom I regarded at the time as the smartest member of Congress, was not. A friend of mine, Gary King, with whom I do a weekly update on research on the assassination of John Kennedy, where Israel played a part, but where the primary mover and shaker was Lyndon B. Johnson himself, asked me a year or so ago, did I know how many members of the present Congress had refused to sign the pledge? And I admitted I did not, and he held up one finger of one hand. Only one member of the then extant Congress had refused to sign the pledge. So the influence of Israel over our Congress is immense. Donald Trump not only gave a speech to AIPAC assuring them he'd be the strongest supporter of Israel that the United States has ever had, but he's followed through with a multitude of decisions and moves that I regard as reprehensible, including moving the American embassy to Jerusalem as an implicit claim that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, which is really grossly premature. The exact status of Jerusalem as an international city has to be determined by a comprehensive peace settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. He's also declared the Golan Heights to be Israeli property, when in the eyes of the world, the Golan Heights is Israeli-occupied Syrian territory. And by the way, there's been the discovery of a huge natural gas reserve beneath the Golan Heights that would redound to the benefit of the Palestinian people in Syria were their justice here. He also unfunded the United Nations organization that assists Palestinian refugees, which I regarded as inhumane, even sadistic. Most recently, by executive order, he's expanded the definition of anti-Semitism to include not just criticism or disvaluing of persons on the basis of their ethnic origin or religious beliefs. The classic definition typically applied to Jews, but expanded it to include any criticism of the state of Israel or the actions of the Israeli government, which is absurd and a gross violation of our rights under the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. With this attack on Soleimani, it was too much for me to continue to stand by and support this man in whom I no longer believe. There are those who think he's a wizard, that this is all political theater, everything's going to turn out all right. I have no expectation of that to be the case. I will point out, however, that the Prime Minister of Iraq has acknowledged now that the letter he received from the U.S. commander in Iraq about withdrawing forces from Iraq was bona fide, authentic, and signed. So the fact that the U.S. is trying to, discredit that as having happened, having been an accidental transmission, is not a defensible claim. Here's an article from Veterans Today. Iraqi PM confirms receiving signed U.S. pullout letter, which was accepted and confirmed amid confusion over a reported U.S. letter to Iraq announcing the steps its military would take to move out of Iraq. Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi, who, by the way, is very, very good and appears to be forced out because he's too good. Mahdi confirms that Baghdad has actually received signed and translated copies from the U.S. Army concerning the withdrawal. And in fact, it's fascinating that the withdrawal letter was needed to be retranslated to make sure it was correct. Are we still connected or no?
Yeah.
Okay, because your image disappeared. I guess you just took it off of the video. Yeah. Those are my primary comments on what's going on here. But you got to understand, this is catastrophic for Donald Trump, in my opinion, politically. If he's able to, tweak a magic wand and work a miracle, the best possible thing he could do would be to use this as the occasion to withdraw American forces from Iraq. Without the logistic support from Iraq, American forces cannot remain viable in Syria. So he would be, in effect, getting the U.S. out of Syria and declare victory. Now, if he did that, he might be able to rehabilitate himself, because most of his supporters haven't even put together the pieces I've been explaining here with regard to the monstrosity of the actions he's been taking here and how he appears to be an Israeli stooge. Let me say, I left looking for a candidate when I review the 2016 election. It seems to me that, I'll call you back, that Bernie Sanders would almost certainly have defeated Donald Trump had the Democratic Party allowed him to be their candidate, for the following reason. Trump was elected, as we know from studies by the University of Minnesota and Boston University, because voters in rural counties in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which had suffered many casualties from the wars in the Middle East, judged him to be the less likely of the two candidates to continue those policies. So that if Trump were now to follow through on that, his most important campaign pledge, which he has heretofore not only not followed through upon, but made matters much worse by starting a new war in the Middle East with a far more formidable adversary, he might be able to salvage his position. But I do believe, had the Democrats not not sabotage Bernie Sanders' campaign at behalf of Hillary, because Hillary bought the DNC hook, line, and sinker, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz transferred 13 primaries that Bernie had legitimately won to Hillary's category in order to guarantee she would be the nominee, because Bernie's foreign policy of getting out of the Middle East overlapped with Trump's, and most Americans, I believe, would have thought Bernie's domestic policies were more attractive than Trump's. I believe that Bernie Sanders would have defeated Donald Trump. Now, I've been a very strong supporter of Trump with qualifications, because I've been very troubled about his pro-Israeli actions in relation to the Middle East, turning the U.S. into a United States of Israel, where I'm now in a quandary over whom I might find as a viable candidate to support. Joe Biden obviously is a disaster. There's so much wrong with him, and all the attention on Ukraine and the scandals involving his son Hunter are doomed to defeat him. He's subject to malaprops. He says the wrong thing. He was even talking about the situation here in the Middle East and mixing Iraq and Iran. I don't think Biden, even though for a while he's going to continue to have support, is going to make it. Elizabeth Warren has shown herself to be a fraud on multiple grounds, not only Pocahontas falsely claiming to have American Indian blood, but also to have been denied a position as a special needs teacher because she was pregnant, both of which turned out to be false, ludicrously false, and she comes across as a school marm. I don't think the American people want this woman lecturing them every night in their living room on television. If you go further down, Pete Buttigieg is a very articulate, intelligent guy, but he's just the mayor of a city of South Bend. I cannot see him being capable of carrying the load. And Amy Klobuchar seems to me to be a typical housewife. That's how she comes across to me. I don't care for her. I find her very uninteresting and very dull, dim-witted. I don't think she's a serious candidate. Now, the one in the whole group, and of course you got Michael Bloomberg, who's a billionaire many times richer than Trump, estimated having a worth of $55 billion. Trump, approximately $3, is trying to muscle his way in. And the other story I do want to address during our conversation is what's going on in Virginia, where he bought the legislature there, lock, stock, and barrel,
yes,
of anti-Second Amendment zealots who are perhaps going to precipitate the Second American Civil War. I mean, a real civil war of monumental proportions.
Yep.
Is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi, as I remarked before, had the integrity to visit with Bashar al-Assad. She has served 2 tours in the Middle East. She's very well spoken. She has a wonderful demeanor. She's a serious person. She's a very attractive candidate, both physically and intellectually, if she comes around on the Second Amendment, because she has not shown an understanding of the role that guns play in American life, where studies overseen by the Center for Disease Control, for example, have revealed that Americans use guns for defensive purposes between 500,000 and 3 million times every single year, saving an estimated 200,000 American lives, where if you put together all the phony, baloney, fake drills and stuff here in the U.S., Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, Orlando, Dallas, Parkland, Charlottesville, Las Vegas, you might get, close to 200, not 200,000. Where the recent church shooting in Texas was a perfect illustration of what we need to grasp, the idea the NRA has advocated for some time, a good man with a gun versus a bad man with a gun. And while I've heard reasons to believe it might even have been staged, it has made an indelible impression by showing the right response. Which leads me, before turning to Virginia, to say that at this point in time, I'm inclined to think the most viable candidate would be Bernie Sanders running with Tulsi Gabbard. I think very highly of Tulsi. I do believe that Bernie's right about Medicare for all, that Medicare was actually designed to be expanded to the whole population piecemeal. The United States is the only great industrialized nation that does not have a national health care plan for all of its citizens, for God's sake. Muammar Gaddafi had a national health care plan for all the residents, all the citizens of Libya. If you had a medical problem that couldn't be dealt with there, he would fly you and a friend or relative anywhere in the world, all expense paid, to have it dealt with elsewhere. He was a great man. He was sharing the wealth of Libya with the Libyan people. National public education, national warehouses stocked with food. It was virtually the closest thing to a humane society perhaps ever established on the face of earth. Even Aristotle, among the three greatest philosophers, observed in relation to political theory that a benevolent dictator was the most efficient form of government to benefit the people, because he has the resources and the ability to implement positive benefits for the public. But where most dictators are carried away with their authority and power and turn out to be a negative force, despotic tyrants. Gaddafi was the opposite. But because he was introducing the Great Waterworks project that would have turned North Africa into a veritable oasis, and in addition, introducing the gold dinar, which would have rapidly become the currency of all of Africa, he was taken out. Hillary played a major role. We know from emails that were released by Julian Assange that France was upset with Gaddafi's growing influence and did not want the Great Waterworks project to go forward so they could retain a role in Africa as their neo-colonial preserve. And where, surprise, surprise, the Rothschild banking empire was upset with the gold dinar, they had a problem getting a foothold in Muslim countries because usury, or making money off of money by way of interest, is forbidden in Islam. So when I heard that the first action of the rebel group in Libya was to found a new central bank, I knew something was terribly wrong. Hillary performed an act as despotic as Trump's in luring the Soleimani to Iraq in order to assassinate him, because Gaddafi didn't put up a fight. He was actually traveling to a location specified by the Department of State under a white flag of surrender. When Hillary had his convoy interdicted, had him brutally murdered, castrated, and sodomized with a bayonet. Later she would laugh and cackle about it, paraphrasing Julius Caesar in relation to the Gallic Wars, saying, "We came, we saw, he died." Cackle, cackle, cackle. Despicable action. Hillary is a sadistic person engaged in child trafficking, pedophilia, and a host of other monstrous crimes, some of which are too horrific for me to even describe here. I would rather have a president who is a Jew, but who puts America first, than a president who, although he is not, puts Israel first. And therefore, as I survey the options, in my opinion, at present, the most viable option is Bernie Sanders with Tulsi Gabbard. But that's, of course, tentative, subject to change. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I don't think the Democrats have a chance at all, and I think that Trump. I'm pretty sure Trump's just gonna win again. And I mean, what can I say? I agree with just about everything you say, which is why, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's common sense. It's blank. It's right on there. But the problem with Tulsi Gabbard, the problem with everybody, and it's just Democrats in itself, is that they already shot themselves in the foot. They already they've burned themselves over and over again. I honestly don't think they have any chance. I don't think they have the slightest chance to win this coming up election.
Well, mind you, I didn't believe that myself. On the 26th of December, I did a top 10 stories of 2019, and story number 1 was the impeachment, and I was enumerating all the reasons why this impeachment effort was backfiring on the Democrats and was going to prove a disaster, and Trump was going to win by a landslide. Well, that was my firm belief for a good reason on the 26th of December. Now, you move forward to, the 6th of January. I guess today is the 7th. Actually, the 8th. Mm-hmm. But by the 6th of January, Trump had performed this atrocity, violating international law, taking out the second leading, initiating a new war. And when you put together all of the evidence I've already enumerated about his pro-Israel sensibilities, I just cannot personally, as a matter of my own self-respect, continue to support him. It's very, very awkward for me. I feel myself very much at a loss, but that's where I stand. Meanwhile, let me add what's going on in Virginia.
Yes.
There's a lot we can learn from the recent elections in Virginia, where Democrats now hold the majority in both houses, the offices of governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. This is a very good summary of the situation by Rob Morse, published on December 27th. Money talks. When your local representative is elected to office because billionaire Michael Bloomberg bought his victory, then the representative doesn't speak for you, he speaks for Bloomberg. Politicians who take large campaign contributions can propose disastrous laws so long as the contributions continue. Bloomberg's political contributions become essential, while the local results of legislation become superfluous. News outlets accept money to run campaign advertisements beyond their personal biases. The media's commercial incentive further distort their ability to report honestly on all elections. Big government politicians in both parties want more government so that political payoffs continue. These politicians have no use for limited government and free citizens. Now, what we have going on here, of course, there's been a massive response by the rural counties in Virginia. Virginia is primarily rural counties, and they have taken a page from the liberal playbook and declared themselves to be Second Amendment sanctuary counties, just as the Democrats have declared many of their cities to be ICE or immigration enforcement sanctuary cities. The difference being that the counties in Virginia are upholding the Constitution and the law, while as the Democrats with their sanctuary cities are violating the Constitution and the law. It's outrageous. Mm-hmm. Mike Adams has been quite brilliant in commenting on all of this, and he believes that Virginia has set the pattern for the nation, that militias are exploding in popularity across America right alongside 2A sanctuaries, gun sanctuaries, suddenly rocketing in popularity in states beyond Virginia. Think Oregon, Illinois, New Mexico, Washington, even California. If you look at a map of Virginia, you see it's mostly green counties. In fact, there are some 90, when you put together counties and major cities not in those counties as gun sanctuaries. The vast majority geographically of Virginia is a 2A sanctuary. So we have another report from Mike Adams. Virginia Governor Northam may soon need 10,000 body banks for his state police and National Guard troops. It's biblical mayhem will be unleashed following any gun confiscation attempt. We also have now a new proposal, Virginia trying to pass ammunition-free zones as politicians double down on anti-gun policy. This is all bizarre in the extreme. I have a colleague in research, Dr. Rivero, who publishes the Fellowship of the Mind's blog, and she recently overlay a 2014 crime map with a 2016 political map. In the areas where you have the highest gun offenses, the highest gun violence are all in Democratic-controlled areas for the obvious reason that they're creating free fire zones for the bad guys who aren't going to give up their guns under any circumstances. And that includes in Los Angeles, that includes in San Francisco, where, of course, the city has been turned into a vast public toilet. That's Nancy Pelosi's district. That's what Nancy Pelosi wants to do for the United States, what she's done for San Francisco. Turn it into a vast public toilet. Seattle's having similar problems, but what could be more obvious than Chicago? Chicago has the most stringent gun laws in the country, but also the highest gun violence. We know from demographic studies worldwide that gun ownership and homicide rates are inversely related. That means the more guns, the less homicides. The Democrats would have you believe the opposite. They'd have you believe the more guns, the more gun homicides. It's simply not true. And that's because when everyone can protect themselves, or you don't know who can protect themselves, perps who would otherwise commit offenses if they felt they were in a free fire zone will hesitate. As a church shooting shows, a good man with a gun can take out a bad man with a gun. So if you look at worldwide demographics, the United States and Canada have the highest gun ownership but the lowest homicide rate. South American countries like Brazil, low gun ownership, high homicide rate. Why? Well, people can also find other ways to kill one another. When London banned guns, they had an epidemic of knife attacks, so they banned knives. I said, what are they going to do next? Potato peelers? Yes, they banned potato peelers. I mean, it's just insane. Look at Africa. Countries with low gun ownership, high homicide rate. Russia, low gun violence, high homicide rate. So the Democrats have their head where the sun does not shine on these issues, many others. I've been with Trump on tightening up immigration. In fact, it looks as though a very large percentage of blacks are going to support Trump. One poll I saw showed 34% of likely black voters supporting Trump. Why? Because the unemployment among blacks is so low. And they also support his tightening up the border, because the border is a conduit for immigrants who will work at vastly reduced wages and take away the jobs are enabling the black community to improve itself. The Latinos appear to be in a similar position. We had a prominent sports figure recently say he believed a minimum of 20% of blacks are going to vote for Trump. If that's the case, there's no way that the black voters are going to vote for Trump. If that's the case, there's no way the Democrats can win in 2020 except by cheating. And this is the hidden factor. Google has been manipulating the vote. Google has ways to affect the outcome by running reminders to get out and vote that practically no one would notice. But if they target only Democrats, they're targeting very large numbers of Americans, and they can swing millions and millions of votes to one side or the other. This is outrageous. It has to come to an end. But a very prominent student of behavioral science, who's the editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, recently testified to Congress about Google having this phenomenal ability to affect the outcome of our elections. It must be brought to an end. If Donald Trump would declare a national concealed carry right, that would be a move in the right direction. If Donald Trump would come to curtail the role of the internet, of Google, in affecting the elections, get rid of the voting machines, which are easily hacked, get rid of gerrymandered districts, get private financing out of public elections, in the federal election, we'd be much better off. I conclude with what I have said many times, maybe that for which I am most remembered. When they come for our guns, the time has come to use them.
Yep. So what is happening in what's the last? So I've been trying to keep up with Virginia. What's the last update?
Well, that they're now trying to introduce a bill to restrict access to ammunition. They're trying to, deprive Virginians of the ability to buy ammunition. In other words, they've gone stark raving mad in Virginia. There's going to be a rally on the 20th at the State House in Richmond, Virginia, which I worry very much may be a trap, because there are hundreds of thousands of Virginians who want to turn out to stand up for gun rights. I'm worried it could be converted into false flag. We have a truck laden with explosives, which was the false scenario we were given with Oklahoma City, the fertilizer bomb in McVeigh,
right.
Timothy McVeigh, who actually was just a patsy. Have a truck loaded with real explosives come into this crowd and blow up and kill hundreds, if not thousands, to tarnish the militia movement. Maybe have it driven by an Iranian who claims he's upset because Trump took out Soleimani, or have someone dressed in militia garb open fire with an automatic weapon on the ground and claim he's making America great again. I mean, there's no end of stunts that can be performed here. False flag operations where the Israelis are the past masters. I mean, look, I was...
wow.
Their history is just laden with terrorist acts as false flags. The bombing of the King David Hotel in 1945 by an Irgun gang dressed as Arabs was used to drive the British out of Palestine. In the 6 Days War, the USS Liberty spy ship was attacked by Israeli planes in an effort to sink it. Lyndon Johnson disgracefully appears to have been involved in that, to come to the aid of Israel in 1967 in their war against Egypt. But Moshe Dayan was such a brilliant general, he didn't need American help. But that was another despicable act by Israel.
You're talking about U.S. Liberty? USS Liberty?
Oh, yeah. USS Liberty, yeah.
Yeah, God bless. How come there's so many questions. I just don't understand why nobody cares about USS Liberty. Why, I mean, the list goes on. And have you heard about this thing? I've been meaning to ask you. I keep reading these articles that say that to become a congressman or a congresswoman, you have to sign this oath to Israel.
Well, that's the pledge I was talking about that Cynthia McKinney revealed about a decade ago. Actually, the first time I saw her talk about it was on Iranian television. I have been to Iran, by the way. I participated in the New Horizons conference in 2014, which was held in Tehran.
Wow.
I met many Iranians, but also interacted with other intellectuals from around the world. It was an open conference to address problems, in this case propaganda emanating from Hollywood. The New Horizons conference has been demonized by the arrest of Marshi Hashemi, who's an American-born but wonderful host on Iranian television, international television, not broadcast in English. I've been interviewed probably 100 times on Iranian television. They never attempt to censor or modify. I can speak more freely on Iranian television than I could on an American network. In fact, they won't feature me because they aren't willing to hear the other side of the story, whether it's about JFK or 9/11 or Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or you name it. So that I, like others, become targeted by fabricated lawsuits and the like, efforts to punish us for exposing the corruption of the deep state and the fact that the United States is now using false flags right and left. Just to give the most obvious illustration, Sandy Hook was actually a FEMA exercise, a mass casualty exercise involving children presented as mass murder to promote the Obama administration's gun control agenda. I brought together 13 experts, including 6 PhD professors, to study what actually happened there, to sort things out, and published a book entitled Nobody Died at Sandy Hook in 2015 on the 22nd of October, which Amazon banned on the 19th of November, less than a month later. After selling nearly 500 copies, it was going to be a bestseller because the American people have a hunger for knowing the truth. We established the school had been closed by 2008, that it was loaded with asbestos and other biohazards, that there were no students there, that it was a FEMA exercise, 2-day exercise to promote gun control, that some of the participants became confused and put up donation websites already on the 13th, the day of the exercise. That even Adam Lanza, the alleged shooter, was recorded initially in the Social Security death indexes, having died on the 13th, making his feet in shooting 20 children and 6 adults the following day, all the more remarkable. One of our other contributors, Paul Preston, who has his own radio show, Agenda 21, who's a school administrator, was so troubled by what he saw being broadcast from Newtown that day, having supervised active shooter drills himself, that he reached out to his contacts in the Obama Department of Education, all of whom confirmed to him that it had been a drill, that no students were harmed, and that it was done to promote gun control. Where Barack Obama himself came to Connecticut and signed 23 executive orders to constrain our access to weapons under the Second Amendment on the 16th of January, just a month and 2 days later. I mean, we have the goods on this. They had to ban it. And now, let me add, it's stunning. We have Mike Palachek, who was my series editor at the time. He suggested the title of that book and wrote the preface, whereas I brought together all the contributors and organized the contents and so forth, placing all the images. Recognize that since Amazon banned the book, we had to create our own outlet, so we founded moonrockbooks.com, which has now published 12 volumes. You can think of it as your conspiracy library. We do research to sort out the authentic from the inauthentic, the real from the fake, about JFK, 9/11, and a host of these other issues. And guess what? Amazon has now banned 5 more of our books. So, of the 12 volumes that have been published by moonrockbooks.com, 6, each of which I edited, bringing together experts on different aspects of these cases, have been banned. That shows you how desperate they are. And what's going on in Virginia, I gotta say, it's a double whammy. They're having to constrain our access, our freedom of speech into the internet, and it's the social media giants that are performing these actions, grossly compromising their past role of being a neutral platform, which therefore requires revision. Steps have to be taken to cease the censorship of what the American people can read or what they can watch by YouTube, Amazon, and these other social media giants on the one hand, so you can't learn the truth about Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or Charlottesville or Parkland and so forth, on all of which I have books I highly recommend, but also because they want to take our guns. And if you don't know better, you might allow yourself to be played, where Dave Hodges a few years ago observed that there were 19 democides during the 20th century, which were slaughters of whole societies. In each case, those democides were preceded by gun confiscation.
Yep.
We can't let America become number 20.
Exactly. So it's crazy because we try to figure all this stuff out, and I guess all we can do is see what happens. So I forgot what you said. What do you think about the QAnon thing? Have you been looking into that?
Well, I do a weekly show. It's been called the Goldfish Report in the past. I do 2 weekly news shows and then a third on my own show, which is The Raw Deal. The 2 are the Goldfish Report with Louisa, which is now being redesignated as political theater beginning in 2020. Where Louisa the other is called Truth versus News, and comes out of a small community television station in Seattle, Washington, with Scott Bennett, who's a former Army Intel and PSYOPs officer, hosted by Don Gron. And on both of these shows, we go through all the latest news reports. Now, Louisa, I mentioned in particular, has been quite enthusiastic about Q and believes everything Q writes, or virtually. I mean, I'm giving you my interpretation. And I, however, am a bit more skeptical. I would like to believe Q has it right. But I'm not in the position of having enough evidence to conclude that Q actually is right. There's a lot of circumstantial reasons to think that Q may be right. But I'm just not to the point of accepting Q at face value. I would like to believe what Q is telling us is correct. And when we start seeing the perps frog walk, to Guantanamo or whatever, when we see Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of whom have committed horrendous offenses, locked up, when we see the deep state truly taken down, I'll become a believer in Q. And, Trump has made a lot of promises. Q has suggested a lot. I like Trump's especially calling out the fake news media, where the CIA began infiltrating our mainstream back in the 1950s in Operation Mockingbird, so that by 1975, William Colby, then its director, was in the position to testify to Congress that the agency owned everyone of any significance in the media, followed by Carl Bernstein with an article in Rolling Stone entitled "The CIA and the Media," in which he cited three high officials, boasting that their greatest successes had been with Time Life, the New York Times, and CBS. And in that era, if you controlled Time Life, the New York Times, and CBS, you had a lock on the transmission of news around the United States. Now, we had a golden era of about 15 years when the internet really did serve as an objective platform for citizen journalists, conservative voices, and conspiracy research to be shared with the American public. Now there has been a massive clampdown, and I can only tell you that the engagement of the CIA with the Mossad has made matters much worse. I have a panel of 100 executives from CNN, every one of whom is a dual U.S. Israeli citizen. I have another panel of 100 executives from NBC, every one of whom is a dual U.S. Israeli citizen. I have another panel of 100 executives from the New York Times, every one of whom is a dual U.S. Israeli citizen. So while there has been foreign interference on our elections, it has not come from Russia or even from Ukraine, but rather from a small country in the Middle East that poses as our ally, but is actively involved in sucking America dry for its own benefit. And as I observed in the beginning, will fight these wars to the last drop of American blood.
Yeah. So, any word on... I was also under the impression that Donald Trump was like JFK. That it, remember Donald Trump saying how he was going to do something about the Federal Reserve, that he was going to, isn't Jerome Powell isn't he the guy? Or is it a new one now?
I can't answer that more than to observe that, yes, JFK directed the Department of the Treasury to print tens of millions of United States notes in the correct belief that it was absurd for the American government to be paying interest to a consortium of private banks for publishing the currency of the United States, which the United States can do itself at no interest whatsoever. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the national debt about which we hear is allegedly compound interest on the printing of the currency of the United States, which is completely absurd.
Exactly.
As a young young Marine Corps officer, I remember holding one of these bills in my hand. It had a red embossed imprint. It said United States note rather than green embossed imprint and Federal Reserve note.
Wow.
So Jack was emancipating us from the Federal Reserve. The Donald, if he were to do so, would go down as perhaps the greatest American president in history. I would like that to be the case, but I have no serious expectation it's going to happen. And the problem is, it seems to me that Trump has now shown himself to be an Israel first, not an American first president. This is what's troubling me so profoundly.
Exactly. He's showing to be a neocon.
I have so strongly supported up until now, in spite of my misgivings about his Zionist foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, I think this is the right direction because he's the first non-politician, but I am just really afraid that this is all just illusion of choice and that exactly, like he was just put up there. Like, I don't want to, people, that's what people tell me. Whenever I talk to people about like, oh yeah, Donnie Boy, what do you think about this and that? And they say he was just a puppet like the rest of them, and he's a, neocon, and it sucks because it's leaning towards that they're being correct.
Yeah, that's right. It's leaning toward them being correct. And for me, taking out of Soleimani was the last straw.
Yeah.
So between the 26th of December, when I was, enthusiastically predicting a triumphal re-election for Donald Trump,
right,
and the 6th of January, I mean, my God, that's only like 10 or 12 days later.
Mm-hmm.
I've reversed my position under the impact of this colossal, calamitous action in taking out Soleimani, which was unjustifiable on any ground. And when I see Mike Pompeo out there giving fake news, when I see Donald Trump repeating fake news, he has betrayed himself. The reason we like the guy is because he came across as an honest dude, plain spoken. But when you see him engaging in double talk, he discredits himself. Mike Pompeo is a scumbag from the beginning. Pompeo and Bolton have wanted to attack Iran for decades. So, the fact that we've now taken out their arch enemy, the guy who's a military genius who actually defeated ISIS, and for whom we ought to have immense respect, where he collaborated with us in Afghanistan. If you go to my blog, you'll see one of the stories I have reported there shows a photograph of Soleimani in Afghanistan with American troops. We were working together in collaboration at one point in time. Taking him out was an obscene thing to do. I am profoundly dismayed.
Yeah, no kidding. So we definitely started out. It's amazing how that's quite the indicator that they started out the new year like that. So I guess we'll see what happens. And I guess people are waking up though. Like to finish off with positivity and optimism, I do think that people are waking up. I think that this Virginia thing, that people are not going to tolerate that crap that they're trying to ban guns, they're trying to ban ammo. That's completely absurd. That's not going to happen. And
let me add one further point about that. Virginia, as I've observed, is a largely rural community. Well, rural families, in order to protect themselves, have to have guns. Otherwise, they're at the mercy of urban gangs who will come out to rape, to loot, to pillage, and to kill. You have to be able to defend yourself. And the fact that these city dwellers want to get rid of guns for rural communities is a manifest absurdity. I would fight that with every drop of blood in my body. This is absolutely insanity. And no American ought to give up their right. Read the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed. The role of a militia, and the Founding Fathers envisioned citizens joining together as a militia. That's what they were talking about in each of the separate states as a condition necessary to ensure independence from the tyranny of a federal government that had overstepped its bounds. What you have in Virginia is a state government overstepping its bounds. We have to stop this, put an end to it. Michael Bloomberg is disgusting. This is of your life, and the fact that he's intervened in Virginia, and it appears he sought to buy the legislature of some 26 states and appears to have succeeded with 24. This man is a monster. He's un-American. He's undemocratic. He's a tyrant. No one ought to take Michael Bloomberg seriously for all of his billions.
I completely agree, and I don't think anybody does. All the people that I talk to, they don't care about him. They don't care about most of these people. Most people just want to be, left alone and live peacefully, and But the problem is, see, the thing, all these wars with Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, all these wars are nothing in comparison to what these banks, the Federal Reserve, and all this central banking crap, the fractional reserve lending system that's been, given to us, and this is the modern day slavery. And so this
you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. Let us hope that the Donald comes to his senses, gets U.S. forces out of the Middle East, stands up for the Second Amendment, proposes has a national concealed carry, closes the border, sticks up for Americans and for America, and he will perhaps be capable of restoring even my respect for him, which he has so severely compromised at this point in time. Mm-hmm. I can't thank you enough for featuring me, for bringing me on your show, because these issues are so important and so pressing, and we're at such a volatile point in our nation's history.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Jim Fetzer, as always. I really appreciate it. Everybody appreciates it. Please keep in touch.
I will. My great pleasure. I'll be glad to come back.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Well, that was the great Jim Fetzer. Thank you very much. That was superb. It's amazing, and I'm glad, because like I was saying, the good guys are winning. People are figuring things out. People are waking up more and more. I'm doing the best I can. Everybody is doing the best that they can do. And so, to that, keep in touch. God bless. Geezy Truth News is out. But seriously, we all got it. So take it easy. Jeezy's out.